started this with me today. It is very humbling to be asked to stand up and do this. To me, the concept of a Ladies' Sunday is extremely rare and foreign. I had never heard of such a thing before. Primarily because I had never in my wildest dreams imagined that there could be a church.
Come on, babe.
That there could be a church so open and affirming, and so truly trusting to allow its lay folk to stand up and speak their minds. What blows my mind about this is that I kind of expected about 2 weeks ago for Dan to say, "Can I have your rough draft? I want to approve it." And that never happened. Nor did they Nor did I get a call from Mary saying the council really needs to go over your notes to make sure you're headed in the right direction. And what this says to me is that this is our church. This is a church where it is our voice, our message, and our one common beating heart that allows us to do the great things that we saw witness to this weekend. More than that, I was blown away that our pastor felt so comfortable and so equitable to all of us that he's willing to step aside or step back and allow other people to infiltrate the minds and hearts of his precious congregation. So to all those things, I say thank you. Listening to the various lay sermons over the years, months, I have come to a couple understandings. That we are all pretty diverse, we are all pretty unique, and everyone's pretty awesome. Nonetheless, I kept thinking, oh, I could talk about this, I could talk about that, I could go here, I could go there, and then when Kathleen asked the 2 previous times, I said, oh, no, I don't want to do that. So on the third try, I said, this is my turn. I'm going to buck up, I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to do it. But when it came time to actually write my words and to write my sermon and to make a commitment, I kind of felt lost. I felt overwhelmed with ideas. There was too much to say in about 15 minutes. I didn't want to go too much further than that. And I began to feel anxious about it. And last week I came into church and I looked at least at 3 or 4 of you and said, my nerves are starting to get the best of me. I don't know if I can do this thing. And everyone's response was common, universal, and authentic. They all said to me, have faith. God will guide you through. And I knew in that moment that I had already chosen the right topic, and I was already headed in the right direction, despite the fact that I was nervous and walking on what seemed like a bumpy road. So I sat down again to write, and I approached it from a very academic English teacher mindset, and I said, okay, what's my thesis? What are my 3 body paragraphs? What evidence will I use to support them, and what analysis will I tie in to prove that my thesis was in fact correct? That didn't work either. So I said, okay, what is it about this church? What is it about this message of faith that I want to convey? And it was simply that I had things to say, and I wanted to talk to you about faith. Romans 8 tells us that we all have different gifts. And according to the grace given to each of us, it is your gift, your prophecy, then prophecy in accordance with your faith. I made note of the word your. It wasn't God's faith. It wasn't Dan's faith. It wasn't someone else's faith. I was being called to speak to my faith. So I decided to come here and talk a little bit to you, somewhat off the cuff, somewhat written in black and white, about what I believe I have learned about faith. And part of being faithful is being authentic and knowing what is important to you. And in every other church I spent my time in, I felt like I had to conform to what they believed God was and they believed faith was. So 2 weeks ago, when Dan made the statement up here, he said, sometimes faith, or sometimes God is a person, sometimes God is an energy, sometimes God is the universe, and sometimes God is simply a tree. And all of those things were perhaps the most comforting thing I could have ever heard from my pastor. I don't always think of God as a man sitting enthroned, floating in the clouds and ministering goodwill. I just don't see that. I see God when I look at the trees, when I look at flowers, when I look at my kids, when I look at each of you, when we share together the passing of the peace, and even when I see creepy crawly spiders and snakes, I still find a way to see God. I know that's a little out there for some, so I kind of keep it to myself. But I found every week that I come here, I want more and more to say that I have these unique beliefs, and that I'm grateful to be welcomed by all of you. So for Dan to, in effect, give me permission to say whatever it is I felt I needed to say, I couldn't think of a better way to talk about faith than for someone like Dan to say, I believe in you and I have faith in you. Made today coming up a lot easier. Along that line, Romans instructs us, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and prove that God's will is a good, pleasing, and perfect will. The world does have patterns that we have to navigate. If we stay stagnant and firm in today's place, we cannot fulfill God's will of changing and transforming. We have to allow our minds to be transformed, which means we have to be willing to see, feel, share, and release new things. Transform to change forms. Not only must the caterpillar have faith in its destiny, so must we have faith in ours. We have to acknowledge that life is, as my favorite blogger, Glennon Doyle, tells us, nothing but brutal. A beautiful balance between all the brutal things that we endure and all the beautiful things that we receive. It is brutal. It isn't meant to be easy, but in the end, it is all meant to be worth it. It is meant to be ours. It is this thought that gives me courage to try new things, like stand before you and recite a sermon. It is to be changing. It is to be dynamic. I pray I continue to grow and change and craft this gift of life, despite that I am teased by fear all of the time. But more powerful than this is my trust and faith and my desire. And suddenly, with those revelations, all is well. Suddenly, I remember that I can do bold things. I can overcome the particular patterns of life that challenge me. But being bold is still a great stretch. So as I faced my intimidation and my childhood fears of public speaking today, I began to question how I had done so many things before. How did I teach for so many years? How did I get my black belt when it was so hard? How did I have the courage to bear and now raise our children? How did we have the courage to make this move to New Jersey? And I realized one thing in each of these instances, and so many more, that my desire to succeed was greater than the fear. Just like I trained myself to stand up and teach through practice, visualization, and desire, I also had to practice and train myself to take spiritual leaps of faith. It wasn't always pretty, the spiritual leap of faith practice, that is, but coming out on the other side is a worthy and beautiful thing. Each time challenges would approach, whether it was the 5-hour black belt test or trusting that I had what it took to be a mom, I was strengthening my faith muscle. Through all these things, I had to set aside my personal desire to control what I thought the outcome should be, and I had to trust that I was on the right, albeit bumpy path. It simply comes down to a choice. During each pivotal experience, I had to recognize that the choice and the destiny was mine. Despite that so many of my travels were, in fact, muddled in fear, it is the power to choose faith over all of that, hope, and cover it with love instead, in order to get my beautiful outcome. I remind myself that when faith reigns, there is no room for fear. So as often as possible, I shut the door to fear and open the windows for grace and faith to flow in. Sounds easy, right? It's really not, at least not for me. Because one of the most important truths that I've learned about faith is that faith can be really hard. Faith is not a smooth Sunday drive, nor is it an unconscious presence. It is not like the beating of our hearts or the pumping of our lungs that keep us going. It is a choice that we make. It is a practice that we have to bring into our lives. Faith is a muscle that we need to exercise. It requires sweat, tears, ups, and downs. But the end result, well, maybe not what we originally expected, is a rewarding and powerful thing because it was earned and not given. We need to accept that part of faith often means coming up short in the things that we think we want or we think we need. It means not always getting what you want. Having faith to me means that every day I get up, I show up, and I don't give up. It means that we may be spiteful for the circumstances we are often dealt, but then we have to hike up our boots and muddle through the mire. We get up, we show up, we don't give up. We do this until we are on the other side. We do this until it is beautiful. This I know so well to be true. As As many of you know and shared in our story with little Braden during our pregnancy and into his infancy, it wasn't always easy, but it became our story, and it became a story that I love. It was not easy. I was not graceful. I was not always strong. And unfortunately, I wasn't always faithful. But I found my way through it. I found my way through the anger that I placed on God, because God sometimes becomes an easy target for things like anger and frustration and despair. I kept thinking if I was faithful, I wouldn't be angry. And then I realized that anger is a natural emotion when it happens. Accept it and move on. And I realized that God didn't do this to my family, but God was going to get us through. So, even though I didn't have my druthers and I couldn't stay home curled in a ball, crying and quivering, I realized I had to go to work. I realized I had to go to the doctors. I had to face the music. And I had to do it day in and day out. And then I would go home and I would eat fried chicken and ice cream and all things related. And it made me feel a little better. And it was a lot of ice cream. Let me just clarify that. A lot. Somehow, I got through each day. Somehow, I pulled myself forward against the urge to retreat. What I didn't realize I was doing each of those days was I was practicing. Each day, I didn't think I could make it. Each day, I didn't think I had the strength to do what I had been tasked to do. Then I suddenly saw an accomplishment each day when I got out of bed. I suddenly saw an accomplishment when I could look at one of my students and smile from the inside and not just the outside. I suddenly found myself feeling strong. I suddenly realized that each day I was building the muscles of my heart and soul to do what I needed to do. I was learning to take a leap of faith with confidence. By the time we were awaiting Braden's arrival, I knew without a doubt that my son would be perfect beyond measure. And I knew somehow that I would be perfect for him, despite my flaws, my fears, and overcoming my faith. I had to tell myself I had to choose to be bold. I had to choose to show up with the best of my abilities. Just like in Romans, if you are tasked to prophecy, then prophecy. If it is serving, then serve. If it is to lead, then do so diligently. If it is to show mercy, then do it cheerfully. Nowhere in there does it tell us that we have to do these things with 100% accuracy. Nowhere in there does it tell us we have to be an expert the first time we show up. Those expectations are implied by ourselves. From this, I realized that leaping doesn't always happen in a consistent, linear form. It rarely happens that we're simply jumping forward. We're jumping up to something. We're jumping to get over something. We're leaping to avoid something, where we're jumping down from something to change direction or to get ourselves out of harm's way. To move in this manner is not easy, and it doesn't often come naturally. We cannot get discouraged when things do not go the way we expect them to. It doesn't mean we have to do it right all the time. It simply reminds us to answer the call, to get up, to show up, and not to give up. Now that I'm between hurdles with our beautiful son, I almost can't believe the hours and moments and the trails of absolute despair I led myself down. It blows my mind that I didn't think I could do this thing. I thought I had a lack of faith. In fact, I thought I had lost all faith. And somehow through all of this, when I look back, all I see is the faith. All I see is the beauty.
Amen.
It was in this instance I was called to become a strong mother, and I rose to the occasion. I do not look back and remember the bruised elbows, the scratched knees, or the clawed fingertips. What I remember is that I answered the call. What I take from this is, again, fear has no home when faith reigns.
Amen.
Leaps of faith come from much practice, from finding ourselves in challenging situations and choosing to accept them. It is in giving yourself permission to try what is ahead of you, knowing that you are, in fact, on the right path. It is acknowledging that every step and misstep will carry you toward your unique destiny. God gives us the tools we need to meet that destiny, and Romans 12 calls us to become a living sacrifice. It is up to us, to you and I, to use our bodies, our hearts, and our souls to satisfy a good and pleasing and perfect will.
Amen.
But we have to approach the work in the right way. We cannot have blinders on. Yes, we have to use our bodies, use the blessing of living to our benefit and to our joy. However, we cannot overlook the word sacrifice. Its connotation alone is displeasing. So in the words, living sacrifice, we learn that while we are granted this beautiful gift of life, there will be sacrifice, there will be suffering. It is inevitable, but it is also manageable when we move through it using our faith. In our times of sacrifice and suffering, we cast out our prayers and demand answers immediately. We want the instant gratification. We don't always know why some prayers are answered while others go seemingly unnoticed, although it is not for us to understand. It is hard to remember that we cannot always see God's purpose, but there always is one. It may mean another door is opening, and sometimes it may mean just slow down, wait a minute, and be here now. I found myself in those times saying, God, why are you doing this to me? Haven't I done right by you? Haven't I done enough? Why are you bringing such pain and hurt and fear into a life that should be filled with pure beauty and pure joy? But I have to remind myself that life is not always meant to be these things. It simply cannot be. Life requires an unfortunate balance. I can't even imagine how hard it must be for God to watch us navigate these trials and tribulations, the losses, the wars, when God has to say no, not now. I know on a small level what it must feel like. For example, when Braden says, Mama, I want ice cream for breakfast. There's a part of me that wants to give it to him. I want to make him happy. I want to see him smile. There's a part of me that remembers being that child and saying, Mom, I'd like some ice cream for breakfast. And the answer was, no. As a kid, I didn't get it. I wanted the ice cream. Not that I was allergic to ice cream, so I really couldn't have it anyway. But all that mattered to me was that I wanted the ice cream and I couldn't have it. Because of that want, because of my hope for the expected outcome, I suffered. So my heart sympathizes with Braden when he says this to me. But yet I still say no. I am the mean parent saying, no, child, you must endure this. And in this case, you must eat your fruit next before you can get your reward. And he is the determined child who at first tries to bat his eyes, then tries to negotiate, and then pitches a fit. Still I say no. I hear myself saying, yes, son, I hear you. I understand where your desires are coming from. I know why you want this. You may not understand that I have a greater plan, a greater purpose, and that it requires this moment of your sacrifice. But I do not, son, take pleasure in your suffering. He doesn't understand that, and he probably never will. But I was drawn to understanding what I was really asking my son to do. I was asking him to take a leap of faith. Although I had his best interest in mind, he doesn't understand that, and he pushed away. How could I expect him to handle such a request with grace? It's not easy, because I remember. In the same respect, I realize that God does not always expect me to handle the problematic patterns of life with grace. Though God is not pleased with my own personal suffering, God is still there, God is still with me. Amen. And I do know that God expects me to find my way through with the strength and love that I have been given. It is God's will. It is my job to fulfill it. It is my job to show my children and the people in my life that we are perfect in all of our imperfections, and that faith will, in fact, carry us through. It is our job to become a living sacrifice. How can I expect Braden to take a great leap without showing him time and time again that no matter where and how he leaps, I will be there and he will be loved and his purpose will be fulfilled. As Eden begins to try crawling, we cannot be there to catch her every time she falls, but we will be there to help her up and to carry through the next time. So just as it is up to us to teach our children by demonstrating the power of faith, so we are called to have faith that despite the many challenges and obstacles we will inevitably face, we will be exercising our faith by getting up, by showing up, and not giving up. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve that God's will is, and always will be, good, pleasing,